Greetings, MBAP 516 online students. This is Dr. Jaros with a video explanation for how I graded exam number 2. So let's look at the questions. Number 1, if I am a vice president of marketing and I find that the managers of 2 departments who report to me, the GM for retail store sales and the GM for online sales, seem to frequently disagree with each other about marketing goals and policies, should I assume that the likely cause is that there is a personality conflict between them? Explain. How should I handle this issue? Explain. Well, this is a two-part question. The first part of the question, the answer is no. You should not assume that it is a personality conflict that is causing disagreement. It might be a personality conflict, but more likely than not, as indicated by our readings, the conflict is caused by the fact that these 2 managers represent 2 different departments. As such, they represent different work groups that have different values, different objectives, and different missions, and different interests. And it is really the conflict of values and interests between these 2 work groups which is the cause of the disagreement, not the personalities of the leaders of those groups. As far as what the managers should do about this, the second part of the question, the manager should make the assumption that even though conflict exists, it can be resolved or ameliorated. And there are basically 3 ways that that can happen. Conflict can be resolved through problem solving if the stakes of the issue in question, the stakes of the issue in which the 2 parties disagree with each other, are high. There can be bargaining or negotiating to split the difference if the stakes involved with the issue are medium. And last but not least, there can be peaceful coexistence or smoothing over of the problem between the 2 managers, basically where the 2 sides agree to disagree if the stakes involved in the disagreement are low. So any of those 3 responses are appropriate on the part of the vice president to address the issue, depending upon the nature of the stakes of the disagreement. All right, let's look at question number 2. Question number 2 says, prisoners, despite being locked in jail cells, have been shown in studies to often be able to exercise power over prison guards, despite the fact that prison guards have formal authority to tell prisoners what to do. How can this be explained? Also, why do prisoner rehabilitation efforts often fail? Explain. Well, regarding the first part of the question, remember the article we read says that the power of lower-level participants, in this case prisoners, they're lower-level participants, depends or varies depending upon their ability to create dependent relationships with those above them. In this case, prisoners do have the ability to make life difficult for guards. Even though guards have all the formal power, if prisoners act up or misbehave or get out of line, get rowdy and disruptive, this can create the impression in the minds of the guards' bosses and superiors, like the wardens, that the guards are not able to do their job and have lost control of the situation. So what happens is an exchange relationship often develops, whereby the prisoners agree to stay calm and follow the rules that the guards establish, and not be disruptive. But in exchange for that, the guards allow the prisoners to get away with certain things that technically the prisoners may not be allowed to get away with. The guards will look the other way while prisoners do things that technically they're not supposed to be doing, in exchange for the prisoners' cooperation and not making them look bad in the eyes of their bosses. Regarding the second part of the question, why do prisoner rehabilitation efforts so often fail? This is something that was gleaned from the article by Etzioni. Etzioni noted that prisons are based on coercive power, power that involves threats and punishment. And when you control someone using coercive power, typically they respond by being alienated. In other words, people do not like being coerced. Prisoners do not like being coerced. So they develop a very negative attitude towards those who are coercing them, namely the guards and the general prison apparatus. That makes the prisoner's mindset not very willing to accept the teachings and instructions of rehabilitation because the coercion that's being used against them puts them in a negative mindset. So they're just not open-minded about being rehabilitated. All right, let's look at question number 3. Question number 3 says, why is motivating employees in public sector organizations different from motivating employees in the private sector? What factors directly influence the motivation of public sector workers? Explain. Well, there are 2 reasons why motivating public sector organizations, motivating employees in public sector organizations is different from motivating employees in the private sector. First, public sector organizations are often characterized by greater procedural constraints that employees have to follow. Public sector organizations, like governmental organizations, often have a lot of procedural rules and policies that by law the employees of the governmental agencies have to follow that private sector employees do not have to follow. Second of all, because public sector organizations tend to be political in nature, meaning they answer to political bodies like the state government or the federal government or a local government, there's often goal conflict that exists in these organizations. Conflict between like Democrats and Republican politicians can make it difficult for employees to understand what the goals are, or there might be conflicting goals. Whereas in the private sector, there's really just one overriding goal, which is to make money. That doesn't exist in the public sector. As far as the second part of the question is concerned, what factors directly influence the motivation of public sector workers? Well, the article we read indicated that there were 3 factors that directly influence the motivation of public sector workers. And these are job goal specificity, job goal difficulty, and self-efficacy. Job goal specificity refers to establishing clear goals for the employee to follow. Job goals can be either vague, meaning ambiguous, or clear, be clearly specified. And the model suggests that it is better to establish clear and specific goals if you want to motivate your public sector employees to perform at a high level. Vague goals that lack specificity do not provide the employee with the necessary guidance to get motivated to do their work well. Job goal difficulty is also important. Generally speaking, the more difficult a goal is, the more motivational potential it has, because difficult goals require that the employee put forth more energy and effort. It forces the employee to kind of get fired up and motivated to achieve them. Job goals that are easy to achieve, you don't really need to be motivated to achieve a goal that is easy to achieve. And last but not least, self-efficacy. Self-efficacy refers to the employee's sense of confidence, their confidence in their ability to get the job done. The higher the employee's self-confidence in their ability to do the work, the more motivated they are likely to be, because they know there's a greater chance that they will be able to successfully achieve the work goal. All right, very good. What about question number 4? Question number 4 says, discuss 2 benefits and 2 drawbacks or limitations of virtual teams. All right, so there are several advantages of virtual teams that are discussed in the article that we read. One is virtual teams can save both the employee and the organization money. If teams meet in cyberspace rather than like in a physical office building, then the organization doesn't need to spend as much renting or building or otherwise maintaining office space. Also, employees save money because they don't have to drive up and back to the workplace to attend a meeting. Okay? Another advantage of virtual teams is that they allow the organization to create a diverse team. If a team is a face-to-face team, then the organization is pretty much limited to selecting members who are all in the same geographical location. Okay? But if a team exists online, the organization can select members that are in far-flung locations where, different members of the team are located in different cities around the country, or even maybe different cities around the world. So you get like a better mix of skills being brought to bear on the work that the team is doing. Also, there are resource advantages for each team member. When a team meets virtually, an individual member is able to have the resources of the team that are in online locations, like on websites, but also their personal resources that they may have in their offices. And you can access both of those resources, your home office resources and the virtual resources, while meeting for virtually online. Also, there are studies that suggest that virtual teams tend to be more productive than traditional teams because when the teams meet, typically there's less time spent on formalities. In face-to-face meetings, when people come together into a meeting room or a conference room, typically a lot of time is wasted with people chit-chatting with each other, saying hello to each other, catching up. Oftentimes a lot of meeting time is wasted with this kind of chit-chat without much work getting done. But the research shows that when people meet virtually, they tend to get down to business right away, and therefore spend more time working and are more productive. However, virtual teams are not perfect. There are drawbacks to virtual teams as well. One drawback to a virtual team is that it requires technological training. It may be the case that, some members of the team do not know how to use the technology that is necessary in order to participate virtually. So the organization will have to spend time and money possibly training people to use the necessary technology. Also, another problem with virtual teams is that not all work can get done virtually. Some work, by its very nature, has to be done in the real world. It can't be done on cyberspace. Like, for example, yesterday was trash pickup day in my neighborhood. The big trash truck rolls around the neighborhood and scoops up people's trash from the bins that everyone puts out. Well, you couldn't collect that kind of trash virtually or online because the trash itself exists in the real material world. So not all work can be done virtually. Also, there can be problems of communication. If we create a diverse team, a virtual team that consists of people from different countries, then there might be language difficulties because people, different members of the team might speak different languages. Or there might be cultural difficulties because the people who hail from different countries may have different cultural backgrounds and different ways of understanding each other. And that might lead to conflict or disagreement within the team. So those are examples of what I was looking for in terms of, some of the pluses and minuses of using virtual teams. You didn't have to list all of those, of course, because I asked you for 2 of each. So you had to give me 2 of each. Anyway, this is what I was looking for when I graded your exams. And that's what explains why, you might have minus this or minus that next to certain questions. If your answers deviated from what I was just talking about, then, points would have been deducted for each question. So I hope this was helpful to you, and good luck when you take exam 3 in a couple of weeks.